Are we live? Hey everybody. Welcome to our first Don Rosa live stream event. I'm Jano. I'll be your host tonight. And yeah, usually around this time of the year, we would be doing some signing tours or other event, maybe in Germany, maybe in France, maybe in Italy, but of course, none of this happened this year. And so yeah, we thought about a way to bring Don to your homes anyway. And I see we already are at about 300 visitors. That's great. Come and go, people. And yeah, I'm Jano. Maybe you already know me from the Don Rosa social media. I'm the guy at Facebook, or you might have already met me at some in-person event. And yeah, Don is already here. Well, not technically here, but at his home. But I already see him here in the backstage area, and he'll be with us in a moment. But before we start, let me just quickly introduce you to all the Don Rosa social media that there are, where you can follow us. That's if you go to Facebook, that's facebook.com/Don Rosa Official. There's also a group on Facebook where you can talk to other friends and meet Don himself. That's facebook.com/groups Don Rosa Official. We're also on Twitter. That's at Don Rosa. We're on Instagram. That's also at Don Rosa. And we also have a brand new Ko-fi account. So if you enjoy this live stream and want to see more in the future, you can support us on Ko-fi. That's ko-fi.com/Don Rosa. And yeah, now without further ado, please welcome, here he is himself. Here is Don Rosa. Hey, Don.
Hey, hello.
Welcome.
I'm coming through. You can see me. I can see you.
Nice.
I can hear you. You can hear me.
I see you. Yes.
I see lots of.
Don, where are you at the moment?
Up the side. So we're. Well, let's see. I should explain where I am. I'm in my comics vault. This is my collection of virtually every American comic book published between World War II and 1970. I used to have lots more post 1970, but I sold those off out of disinterest. That's when America switched over to the Marvel style superheroes and virtually nothing else. And I loved the Marvel superheroes of the 60s, but stuff from 1970 on just. Anyway, this is such as it is. I could, before we get started, I could pick up the laptop and carry it around the room. Of course, I don't know how much Europeans are interested in American comic books, a whole room full of American comic books, but this is something I'm proud of. Many of my achievements I have had help with. For instance, my apparent popularity with Duck fans, I attribute to the Barks fans who appreciate my enthusiasm for what I do. So it's partly, they helped me there. But nobody has ever helped me one iota with my comic book collection, which I started in 1963 when comics cost half cover price. So I didn't limit myself. I started a collection of virtually everything. So Jano, what? Should I pick the laptop up? Do you think people are interested in this?
I think people want to see your comic collection. So why don't you just do a walk around in your comic collection?
This is tricky though. When I unplug the laptop, I'm not sure what's going to happen. It's got a battery.
We'll see.
All right. Okay, it's unplugged. Can you still see?
I see you. We all see you, I think.
All right, let's see if this will work. Get a little closer. First of all, you see my my license plates. Am I pointing right? Yeah, I have to peek.
Yes.
I've had that license plate every year since 1978. Well, we'll start there since that's where I'm pointing. Don't trip over the chair. These are DC comics, all the way down the first 1, 2, 3 rows. Every DC comic since World War II up to 1970, except for the romance comics. I mean, those are for girls. What's under there? Right underneath, hope I'm pointing at the right thing, EC Comics, a full collection of EC, pre-trend, and New Direction. ACG Comics. Those are Harvey Comics. I've got all the Harvey Comics except most of them, which are the, Casper the Dead Baby and Little Hot Stuff and Wendy the Good Little Bitch. Let's see. These are Quality Comics. That's where Blackhawk started. Oh, American Comic Collectors. There's a full set of American comic book price guides all the way to the first one. That's 50 years ago this year. Let's see, what's that? Some various magazines. There's 2 full sets of the Don Rosa Library. I'm waiting in case I find somebody who needs them. Here's a full set of Playboy magazines from up to the first 10 years, full set. Those are one of the 3 icons of American publishing. TV Guide, Playboy, and Sports Illustrated. I don't have any Sports Illustrated, but here is a full set of TV Guide magazines. This is one of my favorite collections, two-sided collection. It's in the shade. Yeah, I guess you can see it. All right, quickly, here's fanzines and some other, a few more TV guides. Here is the Dell Comics. First 2 rows down this way. And the first series of boxes, gosh, I hope I don't drop this laptop. Those are 4-color comics, all 1,340 issues. That, of course, is where Donald Duck debuted and Uncle Scrooge and everything Dell published debuted first in 4-color. There's some of my historic comics. There's my first issue of Uncle Scrooge, belonged to my sister. Still has her name on it. She left it at home when she moved, so by rights of salvage, it's mine. My Golden Helmet issue I grew up with. And I think this is the omelet story. I don't know how that one escaped being swapped out for Superman comics in 1963. It fell behind a dresser drawer or something. Oh, those are an American and recently acquired Canadian edition of my first comic. Here's the comic that to me is very historical. Still, yeah, I'm pointing okay. That's the first time a Donald Duck.
Everything fine.
Donald Duck or Uncle Scrooge, the first time a Dell comic ever reprinted anything. It was gold key by that time. And that's when I found out that other people liked those stories by the good artist, because it said reprinted by popular demand. So these are just all Dell comics. I've got every Dell comic published between, again, World War II and 1970, including gold keys. Next row is gold keys. No, let's see. Yeah, those Dell Westerns. A lot of Western comics.
Somebody asks, how many comics are there in your vault? Do you know that?
I don't know. 40 or 50,000. Then below there are Atlas comics. That's with the blue, if we're in living color. The blue labels. That's Marvel comics in the late 40s and throughout the 50s and early 60s. And then below that with the yellow, I think down this way. Well, anyway, there's a full set of Marvel comics up to 1970. And then there's lots of other small publishers that even many Americans have never heard of. I doubt if many American collectors know the stuff that was published before the 70s. They're probably not interested.
People are asking, have you read all of them? Do you actually read them, or do you just collect them?
Let's see. Let me try to say, I'll answer that in a minute. Let me sit down and finish this, because I'm scared I'm going to drop this thing. There on the bottom shelf is every item with pages in it, featuring the ducks, the Disney ducks, I should say, because none of these are Barks ducks, but they're Donald Duck storybooks, Donald Duck Big Little books, Donald Duck coloring books. I think the coloring books are in one of these boxes.
Somebody wants to know, do you have a list or something about of all your comics?
In my head. Okay, give me a moment. Let's see if I can reposition this and plug it back in, because if I don't plug it back in, it's going to die. So chat quietly amongst yourselves while I do this.
Okay, I will go through some questions to
All right,
see.
I think I've already got it plugged back in. I got to tip it down. Okay, is that back to normal?
Yes,
Yeah,
perfect.
About the comic? Have I read all the comics? I have
okay, we're still
every single one of these comics. I'm a comics fan, but a lot of these comics are garbage. I mean, but I love comics. I would never read. Some of these are just, they're embarrassing. I think I'm in the professional comic book writer and artist, and some of this stuff is just, it's awful. But some of it is wonderful. Many DCs and Marvels, many, of course, the ECs are the best, and the Dells, ones by Barks. Many others are just tremendous. I never buy an old comic that I don't flip through and browse and read a story here, a story there. But I'm not going to read them all, because they're some of them are dreadful. But I'm a collector. I'm a completist. I buy the bad with the good. Okay, what else do we have?
okay. We're still questions about your collection. Somebody asks, "Hi Don, do you own Superman #1?" So he probably means Action Comics #1.
What I would well, let's get into the. Well, no, that's not post World War II. I do have some comics that go back before to the late 30s. I've got some early Superman. I don't have an Action 1. I could have had if I wanted it. It was like $10 back in the late 60s. No, this was even in the late 60s. That when I started, when I got in contact with the other collectors. I remember a Superman Action #1 for $300 once. But I didn't. Before I wanted to get #1, I wanted to get everything back until #1. See, I'm interested in the collection, not just key issues. So anybody who's asking questions like that, I don't want to discuss it. I've got all the ultra valuable key issues that who makes them valuable? Investors, not comics fans. I've got them here, but they are not any more important to me than all the other issues in that set. I recognize the historic significance of a first appearance or a first issue, but I need a complete set. It's not complete without a #1, but it's also not complete without a number 175. So if somebody wants to name a comic, I guess we'll get to the duck discussion in a minute, but like I was saying before, my comic collection is a personal achievement. Nobody helped me with this. So I love to talk about these comics. If some, I guess it would have to be an American, wants to name the most obscure American comic he can think of, and the most unimpressive number, like 213 or 75. If he wants to try that and name it and challenge me to find it in this room, I'd love to try that.
So people you heard it. If you can think of any comic that Don should show you and find out in his collection, write it here in the chat, and we'll try to do that.
The first issue of that or the first issue of this. Just something very obscure that you wouldn't think anybody would have. And I think I'll have it. Now, the first person we might try, I'll have to, if we do want to play that challenge the collector game, I have to give some other base rules. Because, of course, I don't have every single American comic ever published. I can briefly name, if we get to that, the ones I don't have, which is a small bunch compared to the ones I do have. But, okay, it's up to you. I'm taking, pull my shoe back on so I don't trip.
Okay, somebody asked, up to when does your collection go? So how, up to which year?
1970.
87. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's see.
It went past it,
Some
but I sold everything past 1970 out of disinterest. So now, like I said, these comics are all post World War II, say 1946 to 1970.
Okay, somebody suggests, do you have Southern Nights #3? Is that something you have?
What?
Southern Nights?
There is no such comic. It's some
Okay,
new.
I don't know. So
Okay,
let me check.
we're talking about comics from 1970 on. Southern Nights, I've never heard of. That's probably some recent comic. To me, a recent
I
comic
have
is anything after 1970.
I have no idea which ones are valid from the questions, but somebody asked, do you have Chamber of Chills magazine 19?
Comic book. Chamber of Chills comic book, number 19.
Yes.
I just froze. I'm not moving on the screen.
Yes, I think you're frozen at the moment. We still hear you, but
Well, it's not
maybe
going to. I didn't freeze it because I don't have a Chamber of Chills 19. Okay, I'm back.
yeah.
Chamber of Chills. That's a Harvey comic. Chamber of Chills. You still there?
Yes.
I thought people want to talk about ducks. All right. What else? Sing while I'm doing this or something. Here is the full set of Chamber of Chills comics.
Somebody asks, did Don Rosa ever meet Karl Barks? I can say yes, but do you want to tell anything about that?
Well, let's see first if I can show this without a glare on it. There is a Chamber of Chills number 19. Is that the one you wanted? That's the only one I know of. Let's see.
I have no idea, but
see the number? Ah, yeah. Okay, I did it. How much was the bet? You can go pay me in PayPal, I guess, for whatever the amount of the bet was. There wasn't any. You weren't betting money?
probably not.
Okay. Oh, right in front of that box is Boys Ranch Comics from Harvey. That's all Simon and Kirby.
Okay.
Jack Kirby. Full second. All right. What was I going to answer? What was the question? Well,
if you ever met Karl Barks.
Don Rosa, yeah, I saw him once. Not very impressive. Karl Barks in 1998, when I was going to the San Diego convention. I put this away. And this was after he got rid of his so-called business managers who were causing so much trouble, trying to cause trouble between us, for me and for him. And Barks sued him, and some other people sued him. Anyway, he was done with that, and he heard that I was going to be in San Diego. So, and of course, he lived in Oregon, one state up. He invited me to come visit him to clear the air of all this crap that had been going on for, I don't know, 5 years or so. And me and Michael Naiman, who might be one of the people watching right now from Mexico, we flew up there for an afternoon, and Karl Barks took us to lunch at his favorite restaurant, and we hung around his house and chatted, and he had a friend of his film it. I think partially for himself. He wanted to show people that the previous 5 years had all been propaganda and so on. But we never talked. People always want to know, what did you talk about? What did you talk about with Karl Barks? No, nothing. Talked about his solitaire. He used to play games of solitaire for 50 years, and not one game, but he played solitaire for 50 or 60 years and kept track of every game. And he was fascinated by the wins and losses, would show a very parabolic curve, very as decades went. We talked about that, talked about his house, talked, just chatted, because I didn't want to talk about these incredibly meaningful things that he doesn't want to hear me talk about. He doesn't know how to handle it. And I've learned that myself now. He was probably got very nervous or uneasy when people would tell him, grown-ups, people like me who grew up on his comics, and meet him when they were 30, 40, 50 years old, about how important his comics were to them when they were little. I have learned how uneasy that makes me now. It's uneasy. It's I don't know how to deal with it. I never intended to be this important to anybody. I was just having fun telling stories about this guy's ducks. So I knew he didn't want to hear me gushing like that, and I didn't. And but as we were all leaving, I hesitated, walking out of this house, and I turned around and took him by the hand, and I told him, "You know how important you are to me, and there's so many other people in my generation." And I know we just chatted about everything else, but you know what's in my heart. And he said, "Yeah." And that was my meeting with Karl Barks. There was one other meeting. One time during these lawsuits, he and his lawyer called me because they needed some deposition about something against somebody. Won't get into that. And he was on the phone. Karl Barks was on the phone, and I think his caregiver was on another line. And so they asked me a couple of questions, and this was some years before the meeting, 2 or 3 years before that meeting. And so they asked me a couple of questions, and they thanked me, and they started to say goodbye. And I said, wait just a moment. I said, "Do you realize this is the first time I've ever talked to Mr. Barks? Somebody who is more important to me than my father was." I said, this is the first time I've actually communicated with him. And they said, "Okay, thanks. Barks, somebody told me, or maybe it was somebody told me that the caregiver broke into tears when she heard that." And I probably did too, because I feel it right now. Those are my 2 meetings with my one meeting in person and one on a telephone call. I saw him once he was invited to a convention in Atlanta, a marketing and merchandise convention. I'm searching for the right word. It was people who own comic book shops. It was for Steve Jeppy's company, who he distributed all the comic books to all the comic stores in America, and he collected Barks paintings. And like me, my age, of course, he's a huge Barks fan. And he invited Barks there as a special guest, and I showed up just for a chance to meet him. That was when he was mixed up with his business managers, so I was prevented from getting anywhere near him. But he walked through a room once, and Steve Jeppy pointed me out. I was just in the crowd. I didn't expect him to be in this, display room of people's art. And he called me over and introduced me, but I couldn't say anything. He just he said, "This is Don Rosa," and Barks just went, "Oh." And they went on, I guess. All right, let's see if each answer takes this long. We'll be here till tomorrow. What's next?
Okay, let's go through some more questions here. I think someone just asked, how did the Tuomas Holopainen Life of Scrooge, based on the Life of Scrooge album, come about? Can you tell us a bit about that? How did that happen?
What?
The Life of Scrooge album from Tuomas.
Oh,
how did that happen?
Musical album, not a comic book album. How did that come about?
Yeah, that was the
You
question.
have to ask Thomas that. But I can tell you how it came about from my point of view, or how it was revealed to me. I used to make frequent trips to Finland, at least once or twice a year. Not so much the last few years for various reasons, not just the COVID, but other problems with sponsorship. And now the Americans watching this, they're going to think I'm kidding. So you other guys tell them how things are in Europe when it comes to a duck artist or writer. When I would go to Europe, to a big city like Helsinki, especially where the ducks are incredibly popular, in Finland, I wouldn't simply be interviewed by. They wouldn't simply put me on national television, morning newscast, or be on the front pages of the newspaper. They would actually have a press conference. That means they like lay out a buffet lunch, and all the reporters from all the different TV stations and newspapers would come and sit in a big room. Well, I don't know, room bigger than this. There'd be 20 or 30 of them. And I would answer questions posed to me in person by the reporters, and they'd all write down their parts of the interview. But then each reporter would want his own private session, so he'd get some facts that would only be in his article. So I'm doing this for a few hours, and they come in and they say, now, actually, this next interviewer is not a reporter or anybody with the media, but he's our biggest rock star, and he wanted to talk to you. And I said, well, sure, I'll talk to anybody who wants to talk to me. So this guy comes in and sits down, got long black hair and a beard, and I don't know, eye makeup maybe, and black leather. I could see this was a heavy metal. All I know about heavy metal is that there's this awful music that's called heavy metal. I don't even like the music of my own generation. I like music from the 30s and 40s and 50s, jazz and swing. But anyway, this guy sits down and he starts telling me that he's like everybody else in Finland. He's grown up with Marx's Ducks, and he grew up with my stories, and especially my Life of Scrooge series. And he was going to write a soundtrack for that series of stories, like a movie soundtrack for a movie that doesn't exist. And I said, okay. And he said, and he's going to let me know how the progress. And I said, all right. And he left, and I figured that'd be the last I'd hear of that. I was hoping, because I didn't know what to make of it. So then about a year later, I get an email from him, and he says, well, he's finished writing the music, and he has a recording session planned with the London Symphony Orchestra. And at that point, I'm okay. He's that big a star. And I'm going to have to listen to this and pretend like I like it. I have to cross this bridge when I come to it. So then, I don't know, 6 months later, he invites me to come over and make a video, a YouTube video to promote the record. I said, well, this will be interesting. So I just jumped in with both feet. Anyway, I show up at his remote recording studio out in the country, and he says he wants to play some of the finished pieces for me. And I put on my earphones and I listen. And what I hear is, of course, it's nothing like heavy metal rock or anything. It's symphony music. It's like a classical, not classical music, but like a classic movie soundtrack from the 40s or 50s. Now, I have lots of hobbies. This is a major one, but another major one is collecting movie soundtracks. I'm a huge movie fan. People know that. I have a massive collection of original movie soundtracks. And here's a guy who's written a symphonic movie soundtrack for The Life of Scrooge. I listened to this and I wept again. I weep easily when I get over emotion. It was magnificent. And of course, I can go, if anybody, there's Thomas fans out there. What a nice fellow. Of course, I also knew that heavy metal rock star was going to be some weirdo and pompous, and I'd hate his guts. This is one of the nicest guys I've ever met. Now, look at the photos you've seen of Thomas. And of course, I have only seen a small number of them myself. But photos, he's always like this. That's the way he is. He's such a nice, humble guy, just like me. See? You see me doing that too.
Of course, of course.
Uh,
We know, we
he's
know.
such a nice fellow. And he sent me some of his Nightwish records to listen to. And I'd put them on the machine, and they'd start out beautiful symphonic music, because he's always, the fans know, he has a symphonic orchestra as part of his pieces, and it would start out glorious, and then a bam, 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 and I'd turn it off because it's awful. But obviously he's doing well, so I don't think he has to care. He was telling me that of course, he likes that music too, but if he had to do something else, he'd write soundtracks, maybe television shows. There's a lot more television shows these days. He'd watch TV soundtracks, and anyway, that's how that came to be. Now, I'll say this also: the artwork for the album. This was not a problem for me, but I think that caused a problem for him. I did him based on his wife's design. She suggested the idea of Scrooge looking off at the moon, and Goldie's face in the moon. So I did that in line art. And he took which is, black and white. Like, that's the only way I know how to draw. He gave this to his Photoshop expert, who turned it into that like oil painting that you see on the album. I can't admit, I can't take credit for that. It's not my work. It's based on my work. But I don't know how to do work like that. I don't know how to create colors and fades and glows. It's computer work. And when and then I did go back after seeing him, visiting him to record that music video. Went back for the release, the general release. So we did a tour promoting his album, and people kept telling me how much they liked the artwork on the cover. I had to say, I didn't really paint that picture. I had to say that's somebody else's work based on my. And I think Thomas, surely he wasn't happy I was saying that. I didn't have any choice, but he wanted people to think that was my art. Maybe 2 or 3 more people would buy it thinking it's my art, but I don't know. Is it my art? Maybe I penciled it and somebody else think that's how a lot of comic art is done. Okay.
So somebody says hi from Denmark, and Don, why do you think that the ducks are so popular in Scandinavia compared to the US?
Okay. This is an important question that I've answered many times, but I think it's important. The ducks were just as popular in America 60, 70 years ago as they are every place else in the world still. That's when comic books, every kid in America read comic books. In the 50s, that's the high point of American comic books, not the American collectors call the 40s the golden age. No, that they had some nice ideas, Superman, Batman, and lots of, but the stories were garbage. They were simple. The people doing them didn't want to be doing them. They wanted to be in the newspaper strips. Karl Barks was different. He started 1942. He knew, like these other people did, that this was hack work. This was not something that they could take pride in. But Barks was different in that he had the sense that the American work ethic, which is gone. Yeah, I hope you know that. But in those days, they had self-respect. People like Barks. I've frozen again, but I'll keep talking. Do you still hear me?
I hear you fine,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a good pose to be frozen in. I like that.
That's true.
I can rest now and stop waving my arms around. But he took pride in his work. He didn't. He was never told anybody ever read his comics, but so he didn't know he was so famous. Now, see, I'm drifting off from the main topic, as I always do. Anyway, it was after World War II that the soldiers coming back from the war and were starting to need to find a livelihood to make a career for themselves. Now, these were people who had grown up with comic books. They were buying the comic books of the early 30s to the early 40s. They loved comic books. To them, it wasn't something to be ashamed of doing. And that's when you had the golden age of comic books. That's when you had EC Comics, for instance. That's when you had, of course, Marx wouldn't be included in that group of people, but still, that's when you had the best, Marx's best years, all through the 50s. That's when you had the best years of virtually, I'm back.
Yes,
Best
perfect.
of everything. The best of everything in the 50s and into the 60s. That's the golden age of comics. In America, they call the golden age of comics well, the way it used to be, but it's been forgotten. We had the golden age, which lasted up to 1946. Then we had the age that I'm talking about. We called it the atomic age. Dramatic, it's the end of World War II with the explosion of the atomic bomb. That's sort of not a nice event, but an interesting spot to start. That's why it's called the atomic age, which would go for the next 10 years to 1956. And then in 1956, when you had the return of the superheroes from the 40s. Okay, now the question. Let me remember. So in those days, in the 50s and 60s, Barks's Ducks were just as popular here in America as they are in the rest of the world. A Barks Duck comic would sell each month 3 million copies a month in America. Now, if a comic book in America sold 3 million copies in 1955, what should it be selling in 2020? 10 million copies? 20 million copies? No, they're selling like 20,000 copies because the bottom fell out of the American market in the early 60s, mid 60s. People stopped reading comics. That's why you had Marvel Comics and then later DC Comics come up with the idea of having comics, the multiverse, having each comic connected to the other comics. So when I grew up, every kid in America bought a few comics a month. What Marvel had to do was create a system where as many kids as they could get, or what few people buying comics that were left, they had to compel them to buy every single issue. Meanwhile, Dell Comics and Gold Key Comics, who had the Disney license, Dell and Gold Key, those were the big publishers. DC was like the second rung, and Marvel was way down third or fourth. But Dell, which is Western Publishing, was the biggest publisher in America, I think, certainly the biggest comic publisher. They had the money. They did not create their own comic characters, just a few. But 99.9%, they licensed. They licensed everything. They licensed not just Disney, but MGM Funny Animals, Columbia Funny Animals, Walter Lantz Funny Animals. They licensed everything. They had every TV show. They had every movie. Every movie that came out, there was a 4-color comic based on it. They had every newspaper strip. They had everything. Even had Bozo the Clown, which was just a character appeared on the cover of record albums. They had the money. So when comics stopped selling in the late 60s, again, I'll tell you, when I started going to comic conventions in 1969, people at EC and Marvel were coming and giving talks and saying, in 5 years, we're going to be out of business because the magazine distribution system was failing for them, which meant that in the entire nation, this is a big, wide open country, sparsely populated in many places, they would still have to put 10 copies of every single comic published on every single comic rack. And by the late 60s, early 70s, they might be selling one of those, and then they'd have to give a full refund to the drugstore, the newsstand, on all those unsold issues, which would be destroyed. There was no way they could survive in that market. So what happened, Dell Comics, by then called Gold Key, they saw this happening. And so what did they do? They said, well, screw comics. we've got our coloring books, we've got our women's magazines, we've got our puzzle books. It was the biggest publisher in America. So they said comics are gone. Comics are not popular anymore. So throw them out. So we had no Disney comics for certainly not on the newsstand. They were trying to market them in toy stores and packs, which is worse, even worse. For 10 years, we didn't have any Donald Duck or Uncle Scrooge comics. Now, during those 10 years, the American market, comic book market, switched from a mass medium to a cult hobby. Friends of mine contacted DC and Marvel, and they said, instead of putting 10 copies of every single comic on every newsstand in America and losing money, we suggest you publish a comic by first you tell the comic book stores, forget the drugstores and the newsstands. You go to the comic book stores. You say, in 3 months, we're going to publish a comic with this character, this writer, and this penciler, and this inker. How many do you want to buy? And one small store might say 6, big store might say 50, and they would print that many copies. And we're still talking a lot, like 100,000. That's a lot by today's standards. It's nothing compared to the 50s, but it'd be 100,000. And the stores would buy those unreturnable. They could not return them. So this is like printing money. So you had a boom all the way up to the 90s. Comics, so many American comics, because they couldn't lose money on a system like that. When I first started visiting Europe in the early 90s, and I'd meet the big shots at Egmont, and I would still see comics on every newsstand, and so many people buying comic books. And they'd ask me what the comic book business was like in America, and I explained to them what I just explained here, that they would ask the stores how many they wanted, they'd print that many, and then they'd sell those to the stores. The stores couldn't return them, and it'd be a sell-through every issue. And like I remember the president of Egmont was this is like impossible, an impossible dream. They're still making a lot more money than DC and Marvel was in Europe, but with a system like that, it's unbelievable. Still, before I go a little bit further, the funny animal comics, the Disney comics, which had been the most popular in America, and still were the most popular Marx's stories every place else on the planet, they were not part of the changeover. They had disappeared for half a generation, maybe longer. And when Gladstone Comics, more friends of mine, got the license to publish Disney comic books over all of North America, now how could just, like 3 comic book collectors get that license? Because nobody else wanted it. When they came back, collectors didn't want Donald Duck comics. Those were considered for little kids, because the only place they saw Donald Duck or Mickey Mouse were T-shirts in Disney World. So they never caught back on. Actually, the early years of Gladstone, they were still doing pretty good. I think several 100,000 copies of the early Uncle Scrooges and Donald Ducks. We're talking about 1987, 1988. By the time, but comic sales in America still keep going down, naturally. Even comic sales in Europe are going down. That's just the way culture is now. At least they held out in Europe 40 or 50 years longer than they did in America. But by the time, we still have Disney comics. I always say Disney comics because Disney has nothing to do with it. It's done by independent licensed publishers, and the workers are all freelancers. Disney never had anything to do with Disney. But anyway, they still have them published by IDW now. The last Gladstones that came out, I think sales were like 3,000 issues. 3,000 copies per issue. 3,000 over all of North America. And probably many of those were sold to European collectors. 3,000. A Donald Duck or an Aku Anka or a Andersand might sell in one small town in Europe more than 3,000 copies. Maybe in one neighborhood more than that. So the problem is See, in America, comics are not a mass medium. They're a cult collectible. They're a destination object. In Europe, the comics are taken to the buyer. They're put on newsstands, like all magazines. They're a destination. They're not a destination either. In America, they're distributed. In America, they're not distributed. They're a destination. You put the comics in a store, and the buyers come to the store because it's the distribution that costs money. So that's why, even though Marx's comics were gigantic, were the most popular comic books in America, in American history, they disappeared and they were never able to come back. But they never disappeared in Europe. Plus, Europeans have a sense of tradition. Younger Americans just want to know what's new. They don't, if it's 2 years old, no, they just want to, it's either it's new or it has something to do with Star Wars. Okay, then it can be a couple more years old. Okay, that's two long answers. Give me some one word.
No problem. I think according to the chat answers,
is anybody
seem
still
to
there?
love it. Yes,
everybody, there's still
almost
there?
700 people.
All right.
So let me see. I think here's a pretty interesting question. Danielle asks, what's your favorite part about being Don Rosa, in quotation marks?
Okay, I'm not sure.
What do you like best about being this
famous
cartoonist?
That's the part. I mean, the best part about being me right now is living in the middle of 30 acres and growing chilies and staying alone here with my wife and having nice dinners. And because I don't know, people, they see me in Europe and they see me as somebody who's in huge crowds, the center of attention in huge crowds of people standing in line 10 hours. And but that's not me. That's some abstract, strange reality. I am an eccentric loner. I'm a recluse. I live in the center of a that's an 11 hectare nature preserve, and I never leave it. I leave it maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, to go to the hardware store and get something, or get some copies made of something else. My wife goes more often, get some groceries. Now, in the last 9 months, we go even less, and I like it even more. Each time we go out, I have to go because then we'll just buy more, to last longer. That's the best thing about my life. I feel guilty that this world situation has not affected me at all. I do feel guilty. I know there's people it affects terrible their jobs and even their lives and their sanity. So many people, they need to socialize. They need to go out and see people. They need to be around lots of people. I found out I've always liked being alone, and it turns out in the year 2020, that's my mutant superpower. That I can live this kind of like I'm in quarantine all the time, but I enjoy it. My wife says she enjoys it. I think she does. But, get a lot of work done. Been getting a lot more. The only time I'd leave also to go to shows. And normally at home, another way it's helped me, that part of my current life, when I go to shows is when I travel is when the only time I'm not vegan. When we're here at home, we're vegetarians, bordering on vegan, except once a week on Sunday night, we eat anything we darn well want. But anyway, once I skipped going to going to shows. When I go to a comic show, I don't have much choice to eat at restaurants or the hotel. I have 3 big, meaty meals every day, high in calories. So once I stopped doing that and stayed home all the time and was working a lot more in the preserve, clearing trails, I lost 20 pounds without even trying. That was nice. So I've actually benefited from this. But hopefully, maybe by the end of next year, it's going to be over, and I can go back to being the other kind of Don Rosa that travels around and meets I miss seeing the fans. Uh, that's like Liano said. That's one of the reasons we're doing this. At least I'm all I'm looking at is me. But I guess there's other people out there. Uh, the other okay, what this person wants to know is what's it like being so famous for doing something that I love. I'm not even going to get into that. But I still, you saw that book, you've heard of that book. I still get chills. I said that so many times during the interview for the text pieces in that book that they made it the title of the book. If that gives you some idea of how I feel. If you had told me in 1985, 1980, when I was 30 or 35 years old, that someday I would, this is as I understand it, someday I would be the world's most popular current writer and artist of Uncle Scrooge stories. Of course, that's preposterous. That was the greatest wish of my childhood, but it was imaginary. It couldn't have happened. It wasn't something I seriously considered. But then things happened that I just kind of fell into it. Most people know the story. I went to work for a tiny little publisher in rural Arizona, and within 2 years, I discovered how popular these comics still were around the world. I thought they were forgotten, and it still turned out they were the best-selling comic books every place on the planet Earth, except in America. So I went to work from the smallest publisher to the biggest publisher, and then that was 30 years ago, and here we are. What do you think that feels like? I still get chills. It's not real. It's let's change the subject, or I'm going to start weeping on camera again.
Okay, so just a quick information because people are asking about if you have international editions of your work and can you show us your Creek collection? I think I already saw that like 100 times. You can't because it's not in that room.
The what collection?
Your international comic collections of
All
your
right.
work, like your
Next
Creek
time,
issues.
How often are we going to do this? You'll have to ask
Um,
me to see how many.
I think people are very happy, so we can do this more
So
often, I
each
think.
time it will be in a different location. The next time it will be in my so-called studio, and that's where there's a wall of bookshelves is higher than these, with hardback books of only my work. I don't know if any other author in America could have. Maybe some of them have paperback books. I don't know, but of international editions of just my work. And I look at that sometimes with great pride and great puzzlement that I'm not a millionaire. And I've got all these, 2 giant bookcases of books just with my work in them. But of course, I don't get paid for any of those. I get paid for some of the newer ones. A little bit, which I never expected at all. I never thought I'd make any money. Even when I went 30 years ago, went to work doing this, I knew there was no money in it. I didn't care, but it was my dream. But yeah, we'll do a show there. And then the next time we can do a show in my library because I want to show off my book collection. You talk about the Europeans who aren't watching this and aren't interested in American comics. Wait till we do the show where I'm in the library with American novels. Nobody's going to be interested in that, but I am. So we'll try that. But each time and people can suggest where we can do it. Sometime in the summer we can do it out on the deck with on a nice day. That'd be fun. Maybe one time we can do it in the shower. No, that's a bad idea.
Yeah, probably you're not.
But things like that. So next time we'll do it. We'll do it in my studio.
People are saying, yeah, I love watching it, and I could watch this all day, do it every day. But yeah, that might be a bit too often.
Let's wear it here for a while.
So let me check.
Nobody else has a challenge for a comic book? That Chamber of Chills number 19, I'm impressed. What was the name of the guy who asked for that?
I have no idea. It's like 1 million comments up. Yes. It's like 1 million comments here in the chat section upwards. I can't keep up with everything.
Say we
Let
have
me
1 million
see.
viewers now. 1 million, really?
Yeah, it feels like it. Let me
Seriously, how
see.
many? How many? What can you see?
I I can't even. It doesn't show it. See, it shows
Oh,
like 700 live viewers, but here, Peter Brede asks, what kind of books do you enjoy? Any writer who has influenced you in particular?
yes, I should save that for when we're up in the library. Um, all the books I enjoy are older. I collect only, and I read only book series. I guess that's the comic book fan in me. I read only uh, books about continuing characters, like Sherlock Holmes, like Nero Wolfe, like Old Dog Drummond, like hundreds of others. The Saint. So a lot of these are mysteries, but there's also adventure books like Alan Quatermain, H. Rider Haggard guy, the King Solomon's Mines fella. Uh, there's a guy, George MacDonald Fraser, who is dead now, like all these other people are, but he wrote books between the 70s and the 90s. He is, I don't know if he influenced me because I was doing the same. Marx influenced me on those, but he writes historical adventures. I read lots of historical novels. These are mostly written in the 60s to almost to the present, usually Napoleonic warfare, which is primarily sea warfare. I love those. The Sharp novels by Bernard Cornwell. But George MacDonald Fraser writes incredibly well-researched stories about a character named Flashman. He is a British officer, and he lives through the late, no, all through the 19th century. And these stories are the stories he tells when he's like 97 years old to his grandchildren. No, we can't tell them to his grandchildren because they're too risque. So he's telling them, he tells the cleaned up versions to his grandchildren, but he writes these chronicles. Yeah, that's it. That we get to read about his early adventures. They are preposterously well researched. In the back, you'll have the book I'm reading right now. I'm actually reading one now. I can't think of the name of it. It's about John Brown and the attack on the leading up to the Civil War. Okay, in the back of each book, there's like 30 pages, 20 pages of notes, reference to incidents in the book. And sometimes they're a chapter long, like 70 different notes. You've seen the things I write, just a little short text making reference to what the research is. He has a whole section of the book. And of course, as he lives through the entire 19th century, he seems to be in every important location for every important event, and he's met every single famous person. Now, I've had a couple of people come to me and say, your Life of Scrooge stories, don't you think it's rather preposterous that Scrooge would have been in these certain places at the right time and met these famous people? How do you account for that? Because that's where I wanted him. What do you mean? I put him there. So, Flashman has met so many more famous people and been at so many incredible moments in history than I could ever put Scrooge. Okay, and I haven't got to the best part. They're funny. They're tongue-in-cheek. They're not out. It's just the situation it's sort of like a Monty Python sketch. It's the absurd situations this guy gets into, and the dangers he's in, and he brags about what a coward he is, and there's a lot of sex scenes in this. Not pornographic, but you'd have to read one. So George MacDonald Fraser, and then I love all the Patrick O'Brien and Alexander Kent and all the those are the Napoleonic War or the Naval Adventures. Uh, favorite mystery novels, of course, Rex Stout, Nero Wolfe character. That's the greatest detective series. But I'll get more into that, and I'll show you my full sets of all of these authors. Not quite full. I still need a couple of Rex Stout books. And I've got first editions of I like adventure books, like I was saying, H. Rider Haggard. I've got a nearly full set. I'm not talking about paperback books. These are hardback, either first editions or early reprints. I collect only hardback books, and they're so easy to get on eBay. I got a full set of Edgar Rice Burroughs hardback books, usually Grosset and Dunlap, first reprints with the illustrations. Because they're cheap. People don't buy books anymore. I could get an original edition Tarzan book from the 20s or 30s for $10 in nice shape. Wouldn't have a dust cover, but it would be a nice shape book. So I have a full set of those. And but we'll look into that. Okay, I need some shorter questions. I can give short. I don't give short answers to anything.
I think people love it. People say they love it, and you should answer even longer. So everything's fine.
All right.
So okay, we got many questions, so we should probably address this topic. Many people are asking, are there any stories in your archive that are unfinished? Are there any ideas that you had but didn't realize in the end? So can you say a little bit about that?
There are none. There's a short answer. That's one of the reasons I quit. That's one of the reasons I quit. One of the many reasons. I had the idea. Somebody gave it to me. Somebody out there maybe suggested it. That's what I recall. It seems obvious to me, but I don't think I thought of it myself. To do a story about the month during which Scrooge kidnapped Goldie to work with him on his claim in the Yukon. I think that was the last idea I had. And also, when I finished that story, I felt like that's all I had to say about this character. And also, it's a story. People say, "Oh, you're too modest." Well, depends on what question you ask me. Find out I'm not so modest. I love that story, my own story. I love that story so much that I knew I'd never be able to top it. So it's a good time to quit. But there are no unfinished stories. There's unanswered ideas, of course, what happened to the nephew's parents, but I think that's an unanswerable matter. There, that's a sharp one. Well,
Okay, yes, we're still here. I
it's
think
Yano's
so.
job to read these millions of questions and pick one out for me. So, and I'm sure he couldn't possibly. I mean, he's doing a good job, but there may be a brilliant question in there somewhere. But right, there's just too many of them, I guess.
Okay, so Steph says, hello from Greece. Don often used Donald as a comic relief or a stereotypical character, for instance, in Library of Alexandria, while in other stories he had him save the day. How does he feel about him? How do you feel about Donald as a character?
Well, I guess I should talk about when I went to work for Europe. People interviews. Interviewers would say, "You know how popular Donald Duck comics are here in Europe, but you seem to think Scrooge McDuck is the main character, and we think Donald Duck's the main character." So I had to understand myself in that respect. In America, Uncle Scrooge was always the main character because it has nothing to do with money. It's nothing like that. Marx's stories appeared every month in the anthology comic, Walt Disney's Comics and Stories, full set right there. And those were 10-pagers, Donald Duck stories, wonderful, best 10 pages of comic book story ever, right there. And those were usually always Marx. And then we had Donald Duck comics, Now, the early issues, the 4 colors, right up there, full set, that's the tryouts. So there was 20, 25 issues of Donald Duck in the 4 colors, and then he got his own title, starting with number 20, 25, 26. The 4 colors were by Barks, so they got the title going. But after that, they were by somebody else. They weren't, the Donald Duck, the long stories were not by Barks. But then, in 1952, Barks had created this minor character to appear in one story, and readers liked it, and he used him in a couple more stories. And then the editors said, okay, we're going to launch this character in his own title. And it was Uncle Scrooge Comics. 1952, there's the first issue right there. Showed it to you. And in that title, you had 32-page magnificent adventures, all Barks, for the first like 60 issues. They got shorter because they had to, postal regulations insisted they had to have some other characters and other stories in the back. But these were the most magnificent stories ever in comic books. Sorry. And they were quarterly. This was an event. When you're a kid, something that happens every 3 months. My God, it's forever. I mean, so this is when a new Uncle Scrooge comic came out. It's like Christmas is once a year, and spring break, but an Uncle Scrooge comic, 3 months. That's forever to wait. So those were incredibly important. And in Uncle Scrooge comics, Donald Duck was the comedy sidekick. He was never the main. He was just the sidekick. So to Americans, Uncle Scrooge was the main character. I'm an American. To me, Uncle Scrooge has always been the main character, and Donald Duck was just the sidekick and the guy who appeared in these short stories, but not these adventure stories, except for, again, the few back in the early 50s. In Europe, there has never been, I think there's an Uncle Scrooge in 1 or 2 countries, an Uncle Scrooge digest, but it's always a weekly Donald Duck comic. Donald Duck and Company, Anders Zahn and Company, Kalianka and Company, etc. and Company, and in Germany, Mickey Mouse and Company. They're always off on some other. Jano's German. Maybe he can explain it. And Uncle Scrooge was the guy in the back. He was the secondary character in the back of the comic. So to Europeans, naturally, Donald Duck seemed like the most important character. That's why in America, and that's why to me, Uncle Scrooge is by far the main character in Barks's Duckburg. Was that the? So, Jano, stop me when I drift off so far. I don't even remember what the question was.
No, people love it.
I do that. I do that a lot. I go off on so many tangents. Sometimes I can't find my way back and where I was.
Okay, I think here is one that I think, because I've seen the poster in your room once. Tor asked, any opinions on old pulp heroes like The Shadow? I think you love The Shadow, don't you?
Yeah, I love The Shadow, and I think I mentioned in that post I made to the group page just a few weeks ago. Forget what I was talking about, but I think because I talk about the reason that I have such a huge comic collection is I started when they cost half cover price. I never did start a pulp collection, but that's what I wish I had the money to do. But now the pulp has cost a shadow pulp is $400 or $500, I guess. But I have full sets of all the Shadow stories in recent reprint series. You'll see those when we do the show in the library, in the book library. I have of all the comics that I got rid of. Like I said, I get rid of, expunged myself of all comic books 1970 on. There was one short set that I kept. I don't mention it because it doesn't help my reasoning if I say I get rid of everything. Anyway, I kept He was in the mid-70s. Mike Coluta's Shadow comic books. I couldn't get rid of those. That's how much I love the Shadow. I've got a picture of Mike Coluta painting print hanging in the library. You'll see that with all the Shadow. I've got, what else have I got for the Shadow? I don't have any Shadow comic books because those were in, they ended right after World War II. They started at Street and Smith. I do have Street and Smith comics. I might have one Shadow, but I don't have a full set, so I'm not going to bother to show it to you. What else in here is the Shadow? I don't know. Doc Savage. Doc Savage is the other big character. I've got a full set of Doc Savage paperbacks that came out in the, let's see, started what, mid-60s and lasted until not recently. I've got a full set of those, first printings. It's an example of something I collect that I don't read. I've tried reading Doc Savage. They're silly. I don't get it. Him and his, however many there are, 6 or 7 assistants, it's childish. I probably need to read more of those. But the Shadow is just wonderful. Other pulp characters. There was a big fad of pulp reprint paperbacks in the 70s, primarily, late 60s, throughout the 70s. I have all those. What was there? G8 and his Battle Aces. There was The Phantom Detective. There was The Avenger. Not the TV Avengers and not the comic book Avengers and not the movie Avengers. This is the pulp magazine Avenger. I collect Dashiell Hammett books and other authors. Some of these books are collections from pulps like Black Mask. I've got sets, 2 complete sets of the works of Zane Grey and Max Brand, which are all reprints from pulp magazines. And I read those. You have to enjoy them as pulp magazines. They're pulp fiction. You've heard that expression. But I like it. Comic books are kind of like pulp fiction. Doc Savage was too much like pulp fiction. And Edgar Rice Burroughs was originally in the pulps. And sometimes, maybe when I'm up in the library, I'll tell you what I think about Edgar Rice Burroughs. Very popular. He doesn't need me. In fact, here in Louisville, I'll tell you that story. You didn't ask. Okay, never mind. In the University of Louisville is one of the world's most famous Edgar Rice Burroughs collections. A man that was previously owned by a fellow named George McWhorter, and he donated that to the University of Louisville Rare Book Archives, and then, I'm not sure what the connection was or the deal, but he became the permanent director of the Rare Book Archives for the University of Louisville. If he's no longer, it's only recently that he's retired. He'd be pretty old. So that's right here in Louisville. One of the biggest collections, or the biggest public collection of Edgar Rice Burroughs. And when George McWhorter wanted to put his collection of Edgar Rice Burroughs pulps and so on in some nice archival acid-free boxes, maybe they weren't giving him enough money for the rare book rooms. I guess all the money goes to the football program, basketball program. He called me and he wanted to go half and half to get a massive order of these boxes. This is, gosh, back in the late 70s. So I think we bought like 1,000 of these. And these things now cost $7 or $8 each. They're acid-free, they're flip-top, archival quality. This is the kind of boxes that the Library of Congress, I guess, puts. So we combined our order. So that dropped in those days the price down to maybe $1. And we ordered 1,000 of them. I think I kept 700. I kept most of them. And then later on, I had to order more. I finally ended up with 1,000 of my own. And there are, can you see back there that gray mass right there? Those are ones that were emptied out. Some of the ones that were emptied out when I had a friend of mine named Steve Wyatt in California, sell off my comics from 1970 on. And so those are the boxes that are emptied out. I'll never fill them again. I don't buy that many comics, but I filled up the rest of them with the new acquisitions since then. That's been, gosh, 12 years ago. It's been a while ago. So that's my Edgar Rice Burroughs story that links into this very room. And I don't even remember what the question was. Oh, favorite pulp. Is this a European who's asking me this? What's he know about pulp?
I have no idea.
You know, okay, this is serious. Europeans know more about the history of American entertainment than any American does. Americans only want to know what's new. It's brand new. They've never heard of pulp magazines. They've never heard of Tarzan comics by Bernie Hogarth. They've never heard of Flash Gordon by Alex Raymond. They've never heard of Tintin or Tintin or Asterix. They only know what's new. Europeans know old American music. They know old American movies, especially Italian. They know old American comics. Because I grew up in America, and I never had seen a Floyd Gottfredson Mickey Mouse comic, newspaper strips. Those were all seen in Europe. Europeans grew up with those. I never did. That's the reason I don't really care for Mickey Mouse. People say, "Oh, you got to try Floyd Gottfredson," and they finally, like Fantagraphics has been publishing reprints of those. I try to read them, but can't get into them. Can't get into them. If Karl Marx had done them, I'd. Anyway, that's so Europeans know so much more about, and apparently I didn't know they knew anything about pulp magazines too, but I wouldn't be surprised. Give me another comic book. I want to find another.
Okay, yeah, I actually wanted to get to this because we have a cool Find the Comic Book challenge now. Wesley Jones asks, do you have Batman 253 with a shadow on the cover?
253. What year would that be?
I think 1973.
Okay. I keep saying I got rid of those.
Too late.
If you go on eBay, maybe you'll see a Batman number 273 being sold with a certificate. Oh, like this. Okay, try this without getting a reflection. I'm getting reflection off the screen. See, this is the certificate of authenticity that Steve Wyatt made. Get closer. We have a light right up here next to the computer, so it's hard to show something on the computer, on the camera, without getting a reflection. So every comic book that he sold was sold with a certificate of authenticity that it belonged in my collection. So maybe there's still sort of in my collection. Of course, unless somebody threw away their certificate of authenticity, say, Don Rosa, what's he doing? Uncle Who comics? By the way, right now, Steve Wyatt, these many years later, has almost my entire Duck figurine collection. Donald Duck and all the thing is, I finally got rid of these because I knew it all along, but it finally started bothering me more. These aren't Marx ducks, they're Disney ducks. But I had as near as I knew, every single Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge or Huey, Dewey, and Louie or Daisy figurine, three-dimensional figurine that had never been made. And I got bored with it, and so I didn't touch it for years. So finally, he suggested that he take them and haul them out to California and sell them for me. And of course, he keeps his percentage, naturally, just like he did with the comics, which he earns many times over. So maybe in sometime in 2021, you'll see Steve on eBay, I guess, with another certificate of authenticity, and he'll be selling all of my Donald Duck figurines. Some of them are little tiny things, some of them are bigs, but everything, and they go back to the at least for the early 40s. There's some that I never got because they were the most expensive and the oldest, but they were the spoonbill novel. Didn't even remotely look like Marx's novel. And I didn't want to waste, lots of money on those. But so that's something to look forward to. I mean, if you're interested. And they're auctions. They'll start at $1 or something. They sell for whatever they sell for, and we don't put crazy prices on them. Because some of them are just like the comic books. Some of them are common. Some of them are I'd buy anything. Some of them you could get anywhere, and some of them are really valuable. The only way I got them, that's the only time I did private commissions. I was on eBay once, and on eBay, I don't know, everybody else uses a pseudonym. I'm just Don Rosa. And I was bidding on a comic, and somebody came back and said, "So are you the Don Rosa?" And I said, "Well, I guess so. I sleep with his wife. I hope I'm the Don Rosa." And then he started, "Would you do me a drawing?" And I said, "Well, I never." He said, "I'll pay you." I said, I don't like to take money from Duck fans. I just don't feel comfortable with it." And then I forget who suggested the idea. Maybe we were communicating. Maybe he sold me a duck figurine. He said he would, if I found a duck toy on eBay that I wanted, but I was too cheap to pay for, and that was a lot because I don't pay a lot for them. Yeah, I never had that much money. And some of these things were like $500. The mechanical toys from the early 40s or even the 50s. Mechanical toys those are big investor items. He said, if you see a toy you don't think you want to buy, I'll buy it for you if you do me a drawing. And I said, okay, I'm just swapping. It's a swap. And I didn't ask him how much he would pay me for a drawing. Maybe he would have paid $2,000. I don't know. He's wealthy, maybe. I didn't ask him, but maybe he was going to be willing to pay me $2,000. He would. I'd find a toy I saw on eBay. It might be. I knew it was valuable, and he would place a bid on it. I wouldn't know what his maximum bid was, but he would win it. Maybe he'd win it for $400. So he was getting a bargain. He was willing to pay me a lot more than that. And I got a toy, and all I had to do was draw a picture for it instead of paying so much money. And the guy who was selling it might have even got more than it was worth for that toy. So it was like a win-win-win system. And I started doing it with comic books also. Because there's comic books I only did it for 2 or 3 comics, and they're always upgrades. See, I can remember. It was first issue of Lois Lane, which I had a copy of, but I wanted a nicer one. There was a first issue of Mystery in Space. I had a copy of, but it was missing pages. And I'd do the same thing. Somebody would, and these are like $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 comics. I don't pay that money for a used comic book. So it's been about 10 years since I did that. What am I talking about? Oh, I'm just saying about the toys that will be on sale. I don't know. Was I answering a question or was I? Hello?
Yes.
What was the question?
I think we drifted off when you didn't have that copy of.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I keep saying we don't have any 1970 on. I'm lucky that I had the Mike Paluta's issues.
Maybe do you own Showcase number 4 from October 1959?
Now somebody is picking out a famous comic. I'm looking for obscure. Of course I do. I bought a collection of Showcase comics from a single collector way back around 1970. A single collector. They're in like mint condition. A full set of Showcase. I'm not going to show that to you. Pick an obscure comic.
Maybe people don't know obscure comics. I don't know.
Here, wait a minute. How do you spell Showcase? With an S?
Yes.
Showcase. 1 to 55, right here. plastic bags stick together. There it is, right? Okay, that's all you see. I want an obscure comic.
Okay. Journey into Mystery number 12.
Journey into Mystery number. Okay.
I think you now you're back.
What?
You froze for a moment.
First 45 issues of Journey into Mystery. Oh, that's in the back. This is Jan of the Jungle. You don't want to see Jan of the Jungle. That's a Marvel. Yeah, Jan of the Jungle and Journey into Mystery. And let's see. Let me just grab some out of here. All right, here's number 6. 7, 8, 9, 10.
Number 12?
Number 12. Where's the number? Oh, there it is, over there. See it?
Looks obscure enough.
That's a, who did the cover? You can't tell. A Night at Cragmore Castle. I wish you could ask the person why but if he just picked a old horror comic and just randomly picked a number, that's what I want to do. So I had it.
So somebody else asked for Combat Kelly number 44, whatever that is.
War comic. What I don't have are Atlas War comics.
Okay.
That's of all the comics, I've been looking for years for a starter set of Atlas War comics. I've got all the DC War comics. There's a lot more of those. But the Atlas, and those were great. They had John Severin. They had Russ Heath. They had Al Williamson. Oh, God, I wish I had Atlas War comics. I've got all the Westerns. I got all the horror. Well, that's what this is, an Atlas. I don't have any of the. I'd sure like to. I need to get this back in here. I don't want to have comics spread out all over the table. Go ahead. I can talk while I'm doing this, maybe. I can't chew gum. Yeah.
Okay, somebody says, Gabriella says, I was curious about that suitcase right behind you on the floor. It looks a lot like the one my dad brought from Italy in the early 50s.
That is a standard, what's it called? It's like the trunks that in the Army. It's got a certain name. It's just the most common travel trunk, Foot Locker kind of trunk. Let me put it this way. You see where I got this? There's too many boxes there. There we are. That was fun. And what's in here? I can answer that. What's he want to know about? It's just a cheap Foot Locker. This is stuff, things I did in high school. Here's the cover. Oh, here's the original art.
Okay. The guy who asked about Journey into Mystery says, I asked Journey into Mystery because the covers were always so detailed, especially when Kubert did them.
When Kubert?
Yep.
Joe Kubert?
Yep. That's what he says.
No, he never did. He's working for DC. Joe Kubert. This was a cover of Omnicon. Now, this was the schedule of Omnicon, which was a fantasy convention I did in 1976. And it covered TV, movies, and comics. Let's see if I can show you this. So you got Spider-Man and Mr. Spock, Napoleon Solo and Uncle Scrooge, Batman and James Kirk, Captain Marvel, and well, he had to be on there because he was my guest. I actually hired DeForest Kelley to appear at my show. But this would be, that's not Uncle Scrooge. This is the hand I need. It's could be the first drawing I ever made of Uncle Scrooge. So that box is filled with, that footlocker is filled with stuff I did in high school and college. All the artwork to the Patrolby papers is in there. All the artwork to Captain Kentucky is in there someplace. And all the scripts and lots of other stuff. What next?
Okay, I think we had here another one. World of Horror number 13 from 1950s.
Vault of Horror? Oh, the EC comic. But now you're picking an obvious one now. Of course I've got Vault of Horror. I'll show it to you because I love showing the EC. It's right next to me. What number? The number?
13, I think.
Here's Two Fisted Tales. That's a war comic. 13. If somebody is asking me about the Vault of Horror, they should be asking me about the first appearance of the Vault of Horror. All right, where's the number? Have to prove? Oh, it's a dark number. Where's my finger? It's hard to. The TV screen's backwards from what I'm.
Ah, yeah, on the left.
Yeah. Vault
number 13.
That's a Johnny Craig cover. Joe Kubert never worked for Atlas Comics. Have I lost my mind, or has he lost his mind?
Who knows?
Who's he thinking of? Russ Heath? But he's thinking of Russ Heath. That was Joe Kubert and Russ Heath were the main war comics people at DC. Joe Kubert, remember, he worked for, he had his own company. He did horror comics. Okay, don't. All right, what's next?
Okay, so we keep getting one question.
Spread out. Huh?
We keep getting one question. Somebody really wants to know if you would ever consider finishing the unfinished Lanspert Wilby story.
No. No.
No interest at all.
No.
Okay.
I got a message. I'm frozen. There I am. About 2 days ago from, I probably shouldn't mention the name, a publisher who I'm already associated with, and telling me he wanted to call me because he had an idea, maybe several ideas. That's all he said. Some project. And I wrote back, I said, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed because I've just got no interest any longer in being creative. I like my life the way it is. I'm done with being creative. I'm back to being just a fan. I want to devote all my time in being just a fan and meeting other fans when I can get back to doing that. But that system totally eradicated any interest in being creative. And I still don't know what he had in mind. So that box has Two Fisted Tales, The Vault of Horror, and Weird Fantasy Comics 2 number 14, continued in the next box. Yeah. Oh,
Okay, I don't know if it's fitting your your rules, but special agent for the CIA, Robert Crumb's Fritz the Cat.
We're talking about 70s.
I have no idea at all, really.
And I never thought
Okay.
I had sort of underground comics. I might have some of the earliest ones. They're right there. See, right there. That's all I got. But you're talking 1970.
Okay, how about Batman 121 with the first appearance of Mr. Freeze?
These okay. These aren't obscure. These are famous comics. I want some that I went. Naturally, I'd have that. I've got nearly full set of Batman. Give me some obscure. I don't want to be rude, but you're missing the point. You have to come up with something obscure. And I admit, for a European to be able to do that, I don't know how. So I started to write a message to post on the group page to give some kind of rules for this kind of challenge. I'm frozen again. And one of the things I said was my comics, I said, don't name things that are investment quality, that are famous issues. I don't love first issues or key issues any more than any other issue because my goal is full sets, not valuable. Other modern American collectors, it's only key issues, valuable issues, because they just want investment. They buy comics the same way my financial advisor buys mutual stocks for me each year. If I've got some money left over. They don't care what it is. That's why they seal them in plastic boxes. They have no respect or interest in them. They just have them for an investment. That's what a Batman with the first Mr. Freeze. Of course I got it. It's right there. Batman.
Okay, I think I see an obscure one. I never heard of it myself. Do you have A Girl, a Moon romance comic number 9 from 1949 or something, I think.
That's early issue of it's an EC, a pre-EC of Moon Girl. What number is it?
Number 9, romance number 9.
What's this? Find that, put that easily. I don't have any romance comics. The DC, for instance, DC. I've got every single comic DC published between World War II and 1970, except the romance comics, and there's quite a few of them. Those are for girls. And I don't have Archie comics; those are for girls too. Okay, maybe I've got that. What number was it?
9. Number 9.
I'm close. No. That's Moon Girl, EC comic. I've got 3 and 7. Those are pre-trend ECs. Before they realized I should practice with these glare. There, I should stand back. No, it's getting the glare off the light. It's getting the glare off the screen, isn't it? Sorry. I'm getting a reflected image of what I'm trying to show you. So I do not have a Moon Girl number 9. That's straight. That's a romance comic. These are superhero. So I've got the superhero versions. Oh no, it's a crime. EC comics were trying different things before they hit on science fiction and horror. They started out with Moon Girl, which is a superhero. So this would be at the end of, there were still some superheroes around in the late 40s. That didn't work, so they tried Moon Girl Fights Crime, because crime comics were very popular. So next they tried romance comics. Romance comics were popular. And then they gave up, and they canceled Moon Girl. She didn't fight crime, she didn't fight romance, and she didn't fight this other superhero. Okay, I'm going to try to go ahead and talk, but I'm going to make sure I put these back instead of leaving them scattered all over.
Do you have Crime Patrol 15 with what he thinks is the first appearance of the Crypt Keeper?
Crime Patrol 15.
Mm-hmm.
It might be in the same box. These are the free trends. Are you sure? How many of the Europeans want to see this?
I have no idea.
Huh?
But people are still here.
Crime Patrol 15. Where's the number? Yeah, right there. There. Crime Patrol 15. First appearance there, you see up in the corner. You hear that? My wife is upstairs moving furniture. Quiet! Okay, that's still not very, that's a really valuable comic. Still not very obscure, but it's sort of obscure. But I like digging it out. Okay. But don't ignore all the people that want, they don't care about the comic.
Okay, maybe in the meantime, another question. Somebody asked if you have any favorite European artists.
We in America are not exposed much to European comics. Of course, I've got all the Asterix and the Tintin books because Tintins were actually published in America back in the 50s. I've never tried to find them. I don't know how valuable they would be. Maybe not much because Americans still don't know what it is. But they were reprinted, in the 70s in Great Britain, and the Asterix books, the first few were published in America in the late 60s, but then they canceled because Americans don't know what to do with that. It's like not superheroes, but they're also not funny animals. They're funny people, and they're adventure stories, and so that was not American. It's the European style, human adventures, humorous human adventures. That's what I love. That's what I see Uncle Scrooge to be, a human in an adventure, and it's funny. And I still buy the new Asterix books, but they're always British editions. I've got, haven't read them, Mortimer and Blake. I found out there's British editions of that, and I got a hold of a couple of those, and they're sitting up in my to be read stack. Put it there for a while. Up on my the wall of all of my comic book trade paperbacks and hardbacks, there's a certain number of the European ones, but we were talking about pulps. I've got a full set of Perry Rodin American reprints. That's German, isn't it?
Yes.
They started those in the late 60s. Probably they thought those would catch on like the Shadow and Doc Savage paperbacks. And the first one of those I read, Mission Stardust. That's the title of it. I still remember. I love that story. And so I bought everyone, read those for years. And I still got those. You'll see those up there when I do a show in the library. But no, I'm almost as ignorant as other Americans about European comics. When I visited Europe, many times I've done that in the last 30 years, and I'm in a comic store and I see all of these comic albums and hardback books of these historical adventures, or again, comedies with humans, not funny animals, comedies set in the real world. And I'm just, God, I wish I could read, but they don't print those in English. And I'm not like you Europeans. I've barely got one language. Not like you guys. You speak 3 or 4 or 5, and you speak English better than most Americans do. Yeah, all right.
Okay, so here is something that we can maybe clear up for people who don't know any editions of your work with a commentary text, because somebody is asking about what's the backstory of the Hey Daisy, whatever happened to Scrooge drawing with Uncle Scrooge's grave. Can you tell us about that?
That was a German, was it that Der Donaldist, I think, is the German Donald Duck fanzine, not for... How do you describe a Donaldist? It's not really a fan. It's like the Flat Earth Society. These are people that, for fun, they pretend like Karl Barks was channeling a parallel universe and reporting accurately on life there. And these folks have published a slick magazine that comes out how often, Yano? Quarterly?
I
Maybe
think
twice a
maybe
year?
quarterly.
Maybe twice a year.
I have no idea.
One's published in Hamburg and one's published in someplace further south. But and they have scholarly articles about different aspects of life on this in this other parallel universe. So I think that's where this feature was. It's not. Now I'm thinking it's not the sort of thing they do because it's not scientific. Anyway, it was in a German fanzine. At least it was in a European Donald Duck fanzine. And they, I think they've done other times in the past, they gave various amateur and professional cartoonists a phrase to illustrate. And the phrase was, "Hey Daisy, whatever happened to Scrooge?" And people, they got, I don't remember all the famous artists they had, and I was just starting out. This was 93, I think. And amateur cartoonists, and everybody would do their take on this phrase. Some of them were funny, some of them were kind of obscene. All right. Since I take this stuff too seriously, sort of like those Donaldists, only in a different way, I did it. My angle was it's modern day, 1993, and they're standing, all the Daisy and Donald and Huey, Dewey, and Louie, grown up Huey, Dewey, and Louie, are standing over Scrooge's grave. It says 1867 to 1967. And he's saying, "Hey Daisy, whatever happened to Scrooge? Is that what you're asking?" And then what's he say? "Well, his last adventure may never be known, but it was a humdinger, or it was incredible." So I don't know if anybody cared, but that's published in the magazine with 10 or 20 other cartoonist ideas illustrating this sentence. So as soon as we had the internet, the moment the internet was created, it was being abused like it is now. You know, the internet and social media is the worst thing that's ever happened to the planet Earth. Okay, discuss that some other time. It's going to be the downfall of civilization. You see it right now. So as soon as the internet was invented, people started slapping that illustration on there and claiming that I was being very morbid and insulting to Barks's memory, or blah, 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 blah. And this is the classic out of context. And there's nothing you can do about it because it's on the internet and everything on the internet is correct. So the only defense I have is that when it was published in the Don Rosa collection and the Don Rosa library, I get to say finally that this is what this was, and it's what it's not made out to be by these misinformed people on the social media. So I guess that's a good question to answer, since people still don't know the background of it and they believe everything they see on the internet. So that's a good question. That's all now for that. Something nice.
Okay. Okay, somebody has already asked live for 1 million times. I would ask people not to send in the same question like 100 million times, because if I don't choose them, yeah.
Well,
but anyway, somebody asks. Maybe it's interesting for more people. Somebody asks about your creative process. How did the creative process worked? How did you come up with the scripts? And do you have any advice for people who want to do it? Probably not.
no advice. I never give advice. I never critique people's artwork. I never give any advice because I don't know what I do. I don't like my own artwork. I don't know why I know the next panel has to be this, and I know the next panel has to look like, but I can't explain it. It's the sense I have from watching too many old movies. The important thing is old movies when the cinematographers knew what they were doing. And the film editors knew how to put together movies in a narratively correct manner. I told Yano that I hope nobody asked me, how do you create comics? It's so boring. But all right, I should answer that because I know I'm going to be, I get tired of answering the same questions, but I know I need to. And my wife, she'll see me on, maybe it's on YouTube, and I'm being interviewed on these national TV shows in Finland or Norway. And she says, when I get home, you're answering the same question over and over and over, but you still look interested. How do you do that? And I say, acting. That's the secret. I have to act like I'm interested. I am interested, but I'm so tired of the same question. It's nice when somebody comes up with a really interesting question I've never been asked. But I know that the old questions, not everybody's heard the answer, so I have to pretend like I'm interested. Okay, I'm going to pretend now. How did I create a story? First, I would decide if I needed to do a what sort of story? Is it going to be a Scrooge defending his money bin? Is it going to be a Scrooge defending? They're going on a quest for an ancient treasure. Is it going to be a 10-page gag story, Donald or Scrooge? I'd kind of alternate. I'd prefer to do the long adventure stories, but they took so long. They would take 3 or 4 months. That's a long time between paychecks, and the paychecks weren't very good because I was very slow. I always make sure I say that. Pay was excellent if you knew how to work quickly, which I didn't know how to do. And I didn't really try to figure it out. So I'd pick one. So what I'd always prefer to do is a search for an ancient treasure or mystery. So then I would go to the library or my own library, and you'll see that I've got a massive library of lightweight historical books, and especially illustrated books, which I need. I'll look through those I've picked out, I'm not sure how I would decide on a subject, like a part of the world. Like India, I did a story about the lost Indian city, and I'd pick out a area of the world. I'd research lost treasures. I got lots of books about ancient, fabled, legendary treasures. And I'd pick one, and then I'd start doing research. And I would, of course, I wasn't hired. Nobody told me to do stories based on fact. That's just what I did because I enjoyed it. That's the kind of books I like to read. That's the kind of bark stories I love the most, the ones that seemed like they were based on fact, and they were always partially based on fact. I thought they were completely based on fact. Like the Golden Helmet. I thought that was absolute fact. When I was a kid. So I'd start doing research. Anyway, yeah, they don't hire me to do stories based on fact. I do that because it's fun. Even if nobody knows they're based on fact, I enjoy it. Anyway, how much time could I spend on this? I'd just start flipping through books, reading sections of books, and making notes. Copious amounts of notes. And I wouldn't know if these ideas were going to be useful. Maybe 1/10 of them I would use, but I needed to write down all these facts, interesting. And then I think it was like 2 weeks. I'd do that for 2 weeks, and then I'd say, all right, I've worked on my own time for 2 weeks. I'm not getting paid for this, so that's enough. I've got to just hope that I found the best interesting facts that I can and make a story out of that. And then I'd try to write the story. First, the plot without just making notes on pages. What I found was that you could make, well, I hope they were interesting stories, but to me, they seemed like really interesting stories, just taking facts of history and putting them together in a certain way that you had something new that tied things together, and it was all based on history. I loved that. That's why I enjoyed those stories the most. And the one great thing I found was history books are not filled necessarily with truth. They are filled with noted historians' opinions of what the truth is. And a A noted historian is not worth his salt unless he presents his facts as truth, not to be argued with. So I found that sometimes I'd have some, like the story I did about the supposed earlier discoverers of North America before Columbus. Of course, there were. Uh, I found like 5 or 10 different theories presented by noted historians. Probably not all true, but they're not wacky, and I fit them together in an interesting. Maybe I never liked that story, but some people did because there's too many interesting facts. Uh, so then I'll have a plot. The next thing I do is I have a certain number of pages, not like a comic nowadays. They have limitless amounts of time to tell their story, and they waste a lot of full page splash panels and that's okay. But I can't tell us. I've got a certain number of pages. It was sometimes 24 pages. Later on, they would give me a few more. I got up to about 30, but it's always a certain number of pages. So I had to lay out in thumbnail sketches on pieces of typewriter paper. What's typewriter paper? I guess now we call it copy paper. In thumbnail scribbles, I have to show myself what happens in each panel before I start. And the way I do that, there's the two most interesting, the two most important parts of a story is how it begins and how it ends. Okay, now we're getting into something that modern American action movies have completely lost sight of. You have to have a good ending, a firm ending, and a good beginning. And the middle is just action and in my comics, humor, and it's not important. Uh, 2 action scenes, 3 action scenes, doesn't matter. It's just something for getting from A to B. You notice in American action movies, it's the center part, the action, that is the most important now. And I love good action, but for the last 10, 15 years, watching an American action movie, all right, let's get on with it. This is boring to me anyway. So I would literally have, if I know the story, the one panel I know is the last panel. I know exactly how the story ends, maybe the final gag so I make myself a note on what the last panel is. So if I know the last panel, I know the next to the last panel. And if I know this next, so I would literally work by making notes on what's in each panel, going backwards until I got close to this, about the center of the story. Then I go to the second most important part of the story, which is the very beginning. The story can't start out with Scrooge on a treasure hunt, because then you don't care. You have to see Scrooge, or if it's Donald, sitting around the house, sitting around his office, nothing happening. And then something happens that catches his attention, and it catches our attention. And then that develops over a few pages, and as the characters get interested, we get interested. So then I'm one panel at a time until I get near the end, the middle. And then I fill in the middle with an action scene here, a little action, funny, a little slapstick. That part's not important. Maybe some key moments I need to put in there among the unimportant action scenes. Okay, then the next step, there I've got the story. The next step is I get these so-called copy paper sheets again. And now each sheet, those previous ones, each page took up about 1/6 of maybe 1/9. I think it was 1/9. So now I put them out on the 1 page per copy paper, typewriter paper page. And I know what was going to be on each page, and I would first letter in the dialogue, and then go back and sketch in what the characters were doing, just sketches, so you can see what positions or expressions. Now, that's why what I do is incorrect. This is not the way to create comics. The way all other comics are created, the writer first goes to the editor and says, I'm going to do a story about this, and here's a 1 paragraph synopsis. And then the editor says, okay, change this or that. Okay, go ahead. And then he says, okay, now here's a 1-page, 2-page story treatment. And the editor will say, okay, now you need to add something here, add something there. Okay. And then they would write the story. I would not do any of that because it wasn't any fun. I wanted to present the whole story to my editor, Byron Erickson, as a finished comic book story. Finished. It just was not carefully drawn, but it was adequately drawn, so you knew exactly what was happening. And that's the first time he saw it. So I'm skipping. Any other author would say, but what if you have to start over again? I'd say, well, I treated him as a duck fan. I didn't want him to see just bits and pieces until he saw the whole thing finished. And 2 or 3 times he said no. And then I'd have to eat, so that was like 3, 4, 5 weeks work. And I'd start over. However, I didn't know it at the time, but eventually I got other publishers to take it, and so I never did do a story that I didn't eventually draw, except that screwball Donald Duck Goes to Walt Disney World, MGM Studios thing. That was one of Bruce Hamilton's ideas.
The Starstruck Duck.
Yeah. And the problem there was not Bruce Hamilton, because of all people. I'd grown up with comics that were designed to promote Disney World. No, of course not. Disneyland. And the story would, some of them done by Barks, the comic would open up, Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck are in Disneyland, and Uncle Scrooge is in Disneyland, and he says, oh, this ride reminds me of the time. And then they tell a story. It has nothing to do with Disneyland, but that's a more sensible way to do it. My idea was actually to do a story that promoted everything in this new MGM studio amusement park. I thought that was a much better idea. So I came up with an adventure that took place in the amusement park and visited every ride and every attraction as part of the action. And I said, they're bound to love this. And he submitted it to Disney, and it came back rejected, and Disney said it was too commercial. I never knew what that meant, but I didn't care. Disney was always causing trouble anyway, and I didn't want to be, and I did not want them to be in a position to be approving or disapproving of my work. So I said, well, I'm not going to do any. I'm out of this project. Okay, I was back. So I've done the story and submitted it to Byron. A few times he rejected it. A few times he said, well, you need to develop this part. And I'll tell you the 2 times I remember, it didn't happen very often, but 2 times was when I did the King of the Klondike in The Life of Scrooge. And I had him, Scrooge, interacting. It was like based on Destry Rides Again movie, 1939, with Jimmy Stewart, partially. I had Grandma Duck as being involved, and her kids, and anyway, I did that, and Byron said, it's okay, but it's like a big happy family, and they're just having an adventure. He said, and I know, that this has to be the toughest moment of Scrooge's existence. This has to be when he finally gets rich. It can't be easy. It has to be grueling and psychodrama. And I said, okay. So I hope you've seen that story. It's a pretty rough story. But he was right. And the other time he had me, I think, just add pages to it, was A Letter from Home, one of my last stories. And at the end, I thought I was making a mistake. It was really getting too, it was getting too emotional, too much psychodrama. And I sent it in, and Byron said, no, I want you to add pages to the end. I want more of that. So, and I guess he was right then, too, because some people think that was my best story. A lot of people think that was like the last episode of The Life of Scrooge, which is why we put it in the new, it's actually going to be in all of the new Life of Scrooge books, companion books with the B chapters. All right, but then after that, it's just hard work. I had to cut my own paper. I think all other cartoonists are supplied with their paper. I think that's one way. Well, that's just a nice thing the editor to do. I got to tell you another story about that. Remind me, Yano, about being supplied my own paper. I supplied my own paper because I didn't like their paper. I wanted like archival. It was like 100% rag, acid-free, 3-ply Strathmore illustration board, plate finish, very smooth and hard. It would last forever without turning white, turning yellow. I would buy it in sheets that were literally like 3 feet by 2.5 feet. And I'd have to cut my own paper, and then I'd have to rule my own borders. And then I'd have to draw my own balloons. So what would I do first? It's already been so long since I did this. Anyway, I draw the story, and I don't start out. It's another whole question about what kind of pens did I use. None of them were the right kind. None of them were appropriate. The engineering pens and calligraphy pens, and I'd use a real artist like Harold Minton or somebody who knows what he's doing would use one brush for everything. I'd use 7 different pens on every panel because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And that's why it took me so long. It's one of many reasons. So then I'd pencil it in. I'd ink in the word balloons. How would I guess how big the word balloons would be? They said leave as many lines, space for as many lines as it would be in English, but then add 1 line for finish. So I would sort of I'd have the measurements down, and I'd recite my dialogue to myself and draw a line for each word. That doesn't mean that the European word is as long or short as the American. I didn't know how else to do it. I'd draw, and if it came out 3 lines, I'd make it 4 lines, 1 extra line for Finland, and then I'd draw the word balloon. Sadly, I wish my word balloons took up too much space because I had to put them in, but the words were never in my. In all American comics, the words are in the balloons. My comics, since I'm working for a multinational company, or was. My balloons were empty. Okay, so I'd pencil it, then I'd go back and ink it. This all anyway. So this all took sometimes 4 or 5 months. Then I'd send it up, pack it all up, and I'd send it in, and hope they pay me. And I'd write out on a little Post-it note how much they owed me, and put it on the edge of my desk, and I'd get to work on the next right away. I got to tell you the story about buying my own paper. Before I went to work for Europe, after Europe had contacted me, Disney Comics contacted me. I quit working for Gladstone because of the interference they were getting from the Disney Corporation. Stupid interference, bullying interference. So I quit. The main reason I quit is they told them to keep my artwork, which they're not allowed to do. It's illegal. But Gladstone had to do what Disney said. They didn't have a choice. So I said, well, I can't work for a company that's stealing my property. So that's when I quit there, and I had an opportunity to work for Egmont, which is another whole story. But Bob Foster, who was working for Disney, wanted me to do 1 story. He wanted me to work for Disney, and I think I told him I'll do 1 story, a 10-page gag story, to show my goodwill, and I will do more if Disney changes all of its policies to be in line with the 20th century instead of the 19th. They were way behind them, maybe 15th. So I did cash flow, and I sent it in, and he said, they're going to keep your artwork. I said, we'll work that out later. So later on, they paid me for it. And then later on, they realized they weren't sending the artwork back. But they hadn't paid for the paper. So I could possibly claim that it was my property because they had not separately paid me for the sheets of paper. So they sent me another check for like $10 to cover the paper, so they could keep. They don't still have it, by the way. I won't say any more about that. What was I answering? Was that so? And then I'd send the story in, and 6 months later, I'd see it published. And in those days, I'd see it published, and it was colored wrong. And sometimes they'd use the wrong artwork on the serialized parts. And I even found out later they weren't even using my original script. But that's why I finally trademarked my name when they started wanting to do hardback reprints of all this. And that's why you have things like the Fantagraphics, Don Rosa Library, and all of the European imitations, not imitations, but copies, versions of that show my work finally, after 30 years, colored the way I wanted it, presented the way I wanted it with the right artwork, lettered the way I wanted it with background signs in English, if they're in Canada, or oh God, it annoyed me so much. They're in the Yukon, and back to the signs on the buildings are in Finnish or Swedish, or the sound effects are nicely done. Egmont was incapable of doing sound effects because of their system. They could only put black sound effects, and they could only make them in one font. This is in the old days, so because they weren't set up to produce quality comic books for discerning readers. They were set up to churn out quick comic books for kids, weekly. But that was that was 30 years ago. So now it's okay. So that was but that's why I've got this hat on. That frustration for 30 years made all my hair fall out. I didn't mind it turned white. I like that, but it fell out. It's getting. Jano should talk about his new German version of the Don Rosa Library, because it's even better than the American version, except it's in this strange gibberish language.
The strange German stuff.
But he's even improving things that I didn't want to bother Fantagraphics with. Just improving the colors, not just correcting them, but maybe this might be better in this color. Or what else have you done? Coloring mostly.
Continuity, so that everything is always colored the same color.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's so I've answered the question. How do you make comic books? I make them wrong, right? That's why I never give advice. I say, do not, and don't. The people are saying, here, I drew this like you do. I say, yeah, art directors and editors don't like my art. You won't get hired if you draw like me. They inadvertently gave me a chance, and I caught on with people who enjoyed the fanish, amateurish quality of my art, the extra detail. It does not make it good. It just makes it more entertaining. And they can't. But I also think Disney, I once heard told Egmont saying, okay, Don Rosa, but no more Don Rosas. You want stuff that looks cute and cuddly from now on. Okay, what's next? Now, I don't have to answer the question again for the rest of the day, though.
No, but Don, what do you say? Should we close up for today? It's already been 2 hours. Should we keep the rest for next time, maybe?
When do you want to stop?
I think 2 hours is enough, because people already say they have to go to bed now and watch it afterwards. So maybe let's close it up for today and do another live stream soon.
Going for like 3 or 4 hours. All right, I'm disappointed. One more comic book? Does anybody have one more comic book for me to prove that?
Okay, one more comic book challenge for Don. Get him some very obscure one. What should it be?
Obscure, not valuable. What are you looking for?
Now nobody says anything. Do you have Rip Hunter Time Master issue number 25 from 1965?
All right. Rip Hunter. Way down here. That's pretty recent. Oh, that's real screen, so it's way up here. Rip Hunter. It was right next to me. in the same box with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. See, there's Rip Hunter, first issue. Which one you want? It's pretty
Let me
obvious.
check again.
25?
25, yes.
Can you see it when I hold it this far back? It's probably as good as when
Yes, we don't see the number, but we see the cover.
I'll show you the number, my God. If you don't believe me, I'll show you. There it is. I got to find it myself. Where's the camera? There. See?
Ah, yes, number 25. Very good.
Okay, now you say we're done, huh?
I think
what, 8, 7, what time is it there? 10 o'clock?
here in Germany it's 9:15, so that's mostly the standard European time.
I guess that's pretty late. Of course, it's still early here, so I'm ready to go. I could sit here and look up obscure comic books all day. That's a fun challenge. Okay, so what? Signing off.
I think we'll sign off now. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for your support on Ko-fi. Thank you for all the long questions. We couldn't get through too many of them, but I hope we covered some interesting ones. We'll be back soon.
I hope it was at least entertaining, though.
I think people loved it. I think in the comments they said you should even do longer answers than you already did.
We do need some comments to see if we did this right?
Yes.
And can I go back and read through all of these questions?
I think you will be able to look at the questions on YouTube and on Facebook in the comment sections.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we have some feedback. Yeah, thank you. That was great. So people loved it.
Okay.
And
it was easy.
And yeah, we'll settle on another live stream date in the future. We'll let you guys know on Facebook, YouTube, and we'll be back from maybe the studio, maybe the library, who knows. And yeah, if you have other questions in the meantime, put them in the comments. Maybe we'll look for more comments to ask next time. Also, what we might be able to do in the future is put some of you who have especially interesting questions here live with us, so you can join the stream and ask your question in person. We'll work on that. Maybe that happens. And yes, I think that's it for today. Thank you for joining us here on Facebook and on YouTube. Remember, you can, let me just get through this again. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/DonRosaOfficial, Twitter @DonRosa, Instagram @DonRosa, and yeah, stay tuned. Have a great Christmas time if we don't do another live stream until then. And yeah, see you next time. Bye.